Welcome back. In this repair video we're going to replace the front diff pinion seal. This is the Spicer branded, same as the OEM Nissan branded seal. And some tools we're going to need are a drain pan to catch our diff fluid when it comes out, 14 and 17 millimeter ratchets and wrenches, and of course we're going to need a seal puller and a puller for the pinion. They recommend a 2-jaw puller. I'm going to try that one out, see if that works. If not, I'll go borrow one. I've got some RTV silicone, some Amsoil MP for spraying the nuts before we take them out. I might need a hammer. You never know when you're going to need a hammer. And some Severe Gear 7590 to fill it back up when we're done. And just to let you know, I'm not following the repair procedure exactly. I don't have, they call for a beam wrench or a digital torque wrench to measure the bearing preload. We are just going to mark the nut and the shaft and the pinion to get those lined back up at the end. Also, it calls for a new nut. I haven't been able to find a new nut anywhere, so if there's somewhere that they're available and you can get them, put a comment down below and let's get under there and get started. So what we've got to do is remove this drive shaft. It's held on by 4 14 millimeter bolts, but in order to get access to those bolts and that pinion, you need to remove this cross member, and that is for 17s. The same bolts that were removed when we put the diff bushings in. And I just wanted to note that this did start leaking after I installed the diff bushings. I don't know if that had to do with my install, moving the diff around, or actually driving with those bushings in. So we'll put the new seal in and see if that lasts or not. If we have an issue with the leaking again, I think I will probably remove this diff bushing here and leave it out if that's the cause, but I'm guessing it just has to do with the install when I was moving the diff around and the way I was supporting it. So if you are installing those bushings, keep that in mind and be careful that you don't damage that seal when you do that. So I'll grab my ratchet and get those out. So since we're going to lose some fluid anyways, I am going to drop it all and do a change. And their magnet's pretty clean, so that's good. While I'm here, I'm also going to, as you do this first, pop the fill. But I had it open recently, so I know it's going to open up. Yeah. If you do your fill first, it comes out better. Okay, that's pretty much done. It's been doing that for a while now, and I mentioned the thread sealant in my last video, but someone pointed out that it wasn't mixed up when I put it on camera. So clean off your plug, mix up your Permatex, and get some of that on there. And it doesn't take much. Reinstall your plug. So torque on that plug is 25 foot-pounds. Which is pretty snug. It's right about there. Get our drain pan out of the way and move up to that drive shaft. You can see the drips of fluid here. But now we've got pretty good access to these nuts. The heads of the bolts won't turn because they are up against the shaft. Oh, that turned fairly easily. Let's see if this one turns. I'm gonna have to watch my hand here. I'm going to loosen all four before I remove them in case I have to move the truck a little bit. I think I can get that one. I'm going to have to move positions to get the other one. So just before I take the last bolt out, I'm going to mark it so we can get it lined up. The one bolt I had to roll the truck backwards a little bit. That was the one up here, and it just seemed to be a little tighter than the other ones. So I'm going to pull this out, hold this shaft up with something. Maybe I'll use a jack stand or bungee cord, and after that we've got to remove this pinion. Okay, so our shaft is off, it's suspended. Here's the pinion face. I'm not too worried about this because it's going to be up exactly the same way. We're going to put it in the same position. I just wiped it off with a rag. I wiped this off too. And so here's the tricky part. This nut is supposed to be a special lock nut, and I don't have a new one. I couldn't find one. So what you're supposed to do is count the threads that are showing. I've got 2 on that side, 3 on that side, and I'm going to mark it so the shaft there, the nut, and the pinion line up exactly. So I'll use my white chalk marker on the top here, and maybe I'll make another mark with the Sharpie just in case one gets rubbed off. Yeah, and that's supposed to be a special lock nut, so we may put some Loctite on that, some blue Loctite, just to make sure it's not going to move after we put it back on. I don't think this is going to show up that well, but anyway, it's there. Yeah, it does show up. So another good thing about filming this is that I can go back and look at the video in case something is not quite right or not quite lining up. So with your nut marked, you're going to need a 30mm socket. I've got mine on a breaker bar here. So that nut was really hard to get off. Probably one of the hardest ones I've ever had. My breaker bar wouldn't get it off, and my impact wouldn't get it off. I ended up borrowing an air impact, and my air compressor was at 120 pounds of air, and it didn't do too bad ringing it off once I turned the air compressor up to 120 pounds. So next step will be to pull this off, and it looks like we don't need a puller after all. And that part was easy. Let me set the camera up on the tripod, and I'll grab the seal puller and get that seal pulled out. So we tried using the seal puller, but it's not working very well because the shaft is directly in the way. So what I'm going to do is take a screwdriver and, being careful not to touch the housing, but this just to seal only, I'm going to push it in and try and get underneath it. So we managed to push in the side of the seal here, and I'm going to try and go underneath it, both sides a little bit. Now, screwdriver is mostly just going into the sealant. Continue working around. So we got the seal loose. Kind of went around the outside with the hammer and screwdriver as far as I could, like that, keeping it flat, not going in or prying on the edge. And that pretty much loosened it up, and then I was able to use the seal puller and kind of grab it. And I should be able to pull it out all the way. And now we've got obviously got some thread sealant in there we're going to have to clean up. I'll use a little scraper or a tiny screwdriver just to gently scratch that off without scratching the housing. And we'll get that cleaned up. Here's our old seal. We'll get the new one ready and get the diff cleaned up, and then we'll put it all back together. So we got all that old sealant out, just a rag on the inside, wiped it out easily, and then I used a razor blade around the outside. We'll grab the new seal and get that tapped in place. Now I don't have a tool for this or a large enough socket, so what I'm doing is I'm just tapping the block of wood, keeping the block of wood flat, going from side to side and making sure it's going in evenly. So go around it, not too much at a time, until we get everything flush. So the next step will be to reinstall our pinion flange. We should probably add a little bit of gear oil just outside here, and maybe in the splines, the sealing surface. Okay, I've got the pinion flange reinstalled in the orientation it was. Now we can reinstall our nut. And remember, we counted the threads and marked it, so we can line it up. And the torque on that was really high, so we're going to use our air impact again. And once we start getting close, then we'll make sure everything's lined up. So it's important to line it up like this, so you have the correct bearing preload. We're close, we got a little bit more to go. So I forgot to get this on camera, but behind the nut, I did put a little bit of RTV silicone on the splines, and then that nut on there will pull that silicone tight in there so nothing leaks out of the splines on the pinion. We're close, but we gotta get a little tighter on this nut here, back to where it was, and I'm having difficulty getting enough torque to do that. Okay, all our marks are lined up, so that's tight. I'm going to undo my bungee cord from the drive shaft and grab one of my bolts and see if that lines up. Yeah, there, our marks lined up perfectly there. So they go in front to back. Just gonna stick one in there, put the nut on loosely, and then I can insert all 4 bolts, get all 4 nuts on, and then we'll torque those down. So these guys weren't that tight, and you're not going to really get a torque wrench in here. So just grab your 14 mil wrench, and you're going to snug them by hand, or tighten them by hand. And if you're lucky, you can get all of them. They're actually a little easier from the front of the truck than the back of the truck. Yeah, repeat that with all 4. And then we'll put our cross member back up. Let's reinstall our cross member. And where the skid plate mounted up, that's the bottom. The curve goes towards the back because of the oil pan. The shiny bolts were the outside ones. And they were facing the nuts at the back. Number 17s. Then torque those to 96. So with everything back together, we can add our 75 or 80 W90 gear oil to the diff. Remove your fill. And I'm using an Amsoil Easy Pack. And I can just, I also have just a hose on the end of it. So I'm going to stick that up there, squeeze, and you're going to squeeze until the levels to the bottom of the fill hole will start dripping back out. Now if you didn't drain it and only pulled the pinion seal out and lost a bit, you don't need a whole lot. But I believe the capacity is about 2 quarts. Okay, that looks full. We'll stop there. I went a little too far, but well. Now you can put thread sealant on the fill. I've never had a fill plug leak because the fluid's always below that. And the torque on this guy is 25 foot-pounds, but It's not easy to get a torque wrench in there. So we'll just go till we feel some resistance and then go a little bit further. So about there, and then we'll go, let's go, I wanted to go about a quarter turn more, but didn't quite get a quarter of a turn there. So it should be good. Just wipe this down. So the only thing left now is to reinstall the skid plate. That's pretty simple. I'm not going to film that. That's for 12mm bolts to put that back up. And I did clean off the diff a bit, just so that when we go for a test drive we can check for leaks, and hopefully we're all good with that. So if you found this useful, subscribe, give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to enable notifications so you get more videos. Thank you for watching.